The hot sun beat down on the training camp. New cadets were lining up in rows, sweating in their fresh uniforms. Some looked nervous, some looked proud. They were young, most of them around 20 years old. They laughed, joked, and eyed each other with playful competition. Then she walked in. A woman, maybe in her late 30s or early 40s. Short black hair, strong shoulders, and deep, calm eyes. She looked different from the rest, not just older, but quieter. Her name tag read Sarah. She moved with slow confidence, like she didn't need to prove anything. The other cadets noticed her right away. One of them whispered, "Is that someone's mom?" Another chuckled. "Maybe she got lost." Then someone at the back said loudly, "Grandma joined the military." They all laughed. Sarah didn't react. She kept walking, picked her bed, folded her clothes, and stayed silent. She didn't look angry, just focused. This made the cadets even more curious. They didn't know her story, and she wasn't telling. At dinner, the teasing began. One cadet, Tyler, the loudest and most confident of the group, sat across from her. "Hey, Grandma," he said. "You sure you can keep up with us tomorrow?" Sarah looked up, calm as ever, and replied, "We'll see." The table went silent for a second. Then laughter exploded again. Tyler smirked and said under his breath, "Die now." Sarah heard it, but didn't flinch. That night, the cadets planned to test her. They moved her gear to the laundry room and switched her boots. When she woke up before sunrise and found her things missing, she said nothing. She wore someone else's boots and joined the morning run. She didn't complain, didn't shout, just ran silently, step after step. During the push-up test, Tyler made sure to do his next to hers. He pushed fast, then said loudly, "Careful, Grandma's arms might fall off." Some laughed, some looked away. But Sarah finished every push-up, clean and strong. Her face showed no pain by the end of the day. Some of the younger cadets started wondering. "She's kinda tough," one of them whispered. Another said, "But why is she even here? Isn't she too old for this?" Nobody had answers. That evening, during a short break, Sarah sat alone. Cleaning her boots, one girl, Lena, approached and sat near her. "You don't talk much," Lena said softly. Sarah gave a small smile. "I listen more than I talk." Lena glanced at her hands, covered in small old scars. "What did you do before this?" she asked. Sarah paused, then replied, "Different kind of training." When the lights went out, Sarah lay still in her bed. But her eyes didn't close. She stared at the ceiling, remembering old things, gunfire, sand, orders shouted over radios. She blinked slowly, but never cried. Outside the room, Tyler and two others whispered. "Tomorrow we push her harder," Tyler said. "She wants to act like a soldier. Let's treat her like one." They grinned, not knowing the storm they were waking up. Back inside, Sarah finally closed her eyes. Not to rest, but to prepare. She had faced worse than this. But something about these young boys calling her Grandma stirred something old and sharp inside her. Not anger, but memory and something like sadness. She didn't want to fight. She didn't come here to prove anything. But if they kept pushing, they were going to learn. And they were going to learn the hard way, because Sarah wasn't just a woman trying to start over. She was someone who had walked through war, who had lost people, who had survived the kind of missions that even trained soldiers don't speak about. And now she was here with kids who thought pain was a game. Morning was only hours away, and soon they'd see who they were really messing with. The sun had barely risen when the cadets lined up for roll call. Their boots hit the ground with rhythm, but their minds were restless. They weren't just focused on training today. They had a mission of their own, to break the quiet woman named Sarah. Tyler, their self-declared leader, stood at the front with a crooked grin. He leaned toward his friend Jake and said, "Let's see if Grandma survives today." Jake smirked. "She won't last the week." Sarah stood at the end of the line. As always, her back straight, her eyes forward. She looked like a shadow, silent, unnoticed, but present. No one could tell what she was thinking. She didn't smile, didn't react to the cadets. She was a mystery they didn't like, and what they didn't understand they tried to destroy. The first test of the day was a team drill. Move a heavy log through a muddy path as a group. Each team needed strength, balance, and trust. Sarah was placed in Tyler's group. He rolled his eyes. "Perfect," he muttered. Loud enough for her to hear, the whistle blew, and the teams lifted the logs. Mud splashed, shoulders strained, orders were shouted. Tyler slowed down just enough to make Sarah trip. She fell hard, mud covering her face. The log tilted dangerously, and the instructor blew the whistle. "Team disqualified," the instructor barked. Tyler turned and pointed at Sarah. "She couldn't keep up, sir." Sarah stood, brushing mud from her face. She didn't argue, didn't explain. The rest of the team groaned and glared at her. The silent punishment began. For the next hour, she became the target. No one passed her the canteen during breaks. No one helped her lift gear during load-up drills. During a rope climb, someone greased her gloves when she wasn't looking. She slipped halfway up and slammed against the net. Gasps echoed, then laughter. Tyler clapped sarcastically. Tough day for Grandma. Still, Sarah said nothing. She got back on the rope and climbed again. Slower but steady, and she made it. Lena watched from a distance, her smile fading. She had laughed too at first, but now she was starting to feel something else. Shame. That evening, during barracks cleaning, Tyler found Sarah scrubbing the floor. He walked over and dropped a dirty boot in front of her. "Clean it, soldier," he said. Like he was in charge, Sarah looked up at him. Eyes calm, voice low. "You're not my superior." Tyler smirked. "But I'm younger and faster." He pushed the boot forward. Sarah didn't touch it. She stood, her full height only reaching his chin, but for a moment, he felt small. Still, he didn't stop. He turned to the others and shouted, "Let's give her a real welcome." That night, while Sarah was in the restroom, they dumped cold water on her bed. They threw her folded uniform on the ground and stepped on it, then went to sleep laughing. When Sarah returned and saw the mess, she paused. She didn't shout, didn't cry. She quietly picked up her uniform and began cleaning. Again, Lena watched, heart sinking deeper. This wasn't just hazing anymore, and it was cruelty in the morning. Sarah stood in wet clothes and still joined the jog. Each step hit the ground like a message. "You cannot break me." Tyler was waiting. During stretches, he walked past her and whispered again, "Die now." Sarah turned her head slowly and looked him in the eye. Her voice was soft but heavy. "You have no idea what I've seen." For the first time, Tyler hesitated. Something in her eyes made his grin fade. Not fear, not anger, something deeper. Like she had already survived something worse. Something he could never imagine after breakfast. Instructors handed out the next assignment, night navigation. Every cadet had to move through a forest course using a map and compass. In silence, in the dark. Tyler raised his hand and said he wanted to go just after Sarah. The instructor nodded. What Tyler didn't know was, Sarah had done night missions in enemy territory before. This wasn't new to her, but it would be new to him. As night fell, the cadets prepared. Tyler smirked, thinking this would be the moment Sarah would finally crack. But when she stepped into the forest, she moved like the wind. No noise. No panic. She read the map once, then disappeared into the trees. Tyler entered 20 minutes later, full of pride. But halfway through, he tripped over roots, lost his path, and panicked when he heard branches snap behind him. He thought someone was following him. His heart pounded. He stumbled out 2 hours late. Muddy and breathless, Sarah had returned long ago, calm, focused and clean. No one said it, but everyone saw it. The ghost had walked through the dark and come back untouched. Night fell quietly over the camp, but Sarah couldn't sleep. Her body lay still on the narrow bunk, but her mind was far away. The darkness of the room reminded her of another darkness, one that smelled of sand, smoke, and blood. Outside, the wind howled softly through the training grounds. Inside, Sarah's breathing turned uneven. Her eyes moved under closed lids, and the memories came back like ghosts. She was running through a broken street in a foreign land. Gunfire cracked the air. Men shouted. The ground trembled. Someone yelled her name. "Lieutenant Sarah, down." Then Killins. A face flashed before her eyes. A young soldier named Dean. He was bleeding, reaching out. She tried to pull him, but the explosion came too soon. When she woke up, he was gone. Sarah sat up suddenly, her breath sharp. Sweat dripped down her neck. Her hands trembled. She pressed them together, staring at the old scars across her knuckles, tiny white lines that no one at the camp ever noticed. Every one of them had a story. Every one of them carried a memory she couldn't erase. The barracks were quiet. Most of the cadets were asleep, but Lena, the young cadet who had begun to admire Sarah silently, saw her silhouette in the moonlight. Sarah sat by the window, staring out at the stars. Lena whispered, "You okay?" Sarah turned, her face calm again. "Just couldn't sleep," she said softly. Lena hesitated, then asked, "Were you in a war or something?" Sarah looked back at the stars. "Something like that," she replied. Her voice carried a strange mix of pain and peace. Lena didn't ask more. She could tell. The silence around Sarah wasn't emptiness. It was full of stories. The next morning, drills continued. Tyler and the others still mocked her, but their laughter sounded thinner now. Some part of them had started to notice. No matter what they did, she never broke, never shouted, never complained. She worked harder than all of them. And when others collapsed, she helped them up, without a word. During combat fitness class, one of the cadets, Max, twisted his ankle. While others looked away, Sarah ran to him, lifted him up, and carried him off the ground. Her strength shocked everyone. Tyler stared, frowning. "That woman's hiding something," he muttered. Later that day, after lunch, Sarah was called to the instructor's office. The door closed behind her. Inside stood Captain Reynolds, an older man with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much. He smiled faintly. "Still not telling them, huh?" Sarah shook her head. "Not yet." He sighed. "You know, if you told them who you were, they'd stop this nonsense." Sarah looked down. "They need to learn respect. Sir, not fear." Reynolds nodded slowly. "You're still teaching, even when you're supposed to be resting?" Sarah smiled. A sad small smile. "I don't rest well anymore," she said. That night another storm rolled in. Thunder shook the sky, rain hit the roof in heavy waves. Sarah sat alone again, cleaning her boots by candlelight. She took out a small metal tag from her pocket, old and scratched. It read LT Sarah M. Hawthorne, Navy SEAL, Team 6. She rubbed it between her fingers, whispering a name. "Dean." A flash of lightning lit up the room, and for a moment her eyes glistened. Lena quietly watched from her bed. She saw the dog tag, the trembling hand, the faraway eyes. Now she knew. Sarah wasn't just some random woman trying to prove herself. She was someone who had lived through something no training could ever match. The next morning, the cadets were told to perform live combat drills. Paired off in teams, they were to defend and counter under pressure. Tyler volunteered to face Sarah again. Grinning, the instructors raised eyebrows, but allowed it. When the whistle blew, Tyler charged forward. He swung, expecting her to dodge slowly. But she didn't move like the others. She moved like lightning, one twist, one pivot, one step, and Tyler was flat on his back in the mud. The other cadets gasped. Sarah offered him a hand to stand. He slapped it away, angry and humiliated. That night, Tyler sat alone outside the barracks, staring at his hands. He couldn't stop replaying the move, her precision, her control. That wasn't training camp skill. That was battlefield instinct. He whispered to himself, "Who are you?" Inside, Sarah finally slept, but her dreams returned. Only this time, Dean wasn't dying. He was standing beside her, smiling. "You did good," he said. "You kept going." When she woke up, she didn't feel peace, but she felt something lighter, like a small piece of the past had forgiven her. The next morning, the cadets noticed her differently. She didn't talk more. She didn't try to fit in, but her silence felt powerful now, like a shield. They still didn't know her story, but deep inside, something told them. She wasn't someone to mock anymore. She was someone to learn from, and soon they would find out the truth. But not before pushing her one last time. The breaking point was coming, and when it came, the whole camp would never forget her name. Morning came with a heavy silence in the air. The clouds were low and gray, the kind that made the whole camp feel heavier. The cadets were tired, bruised, and sore, but none more quietly determined than Sarah. She woke before dawn as usual, neatly folded her blanket, and stepped outside into the cool wind. Her breath made small white clouds. She looked at the training field, her eyes calm but tired, as if she was waiting for something, and deep inside she knew that something was coming today. The day began with a full-course endurance challenge. A brutal test of body and mind. Running, climbing, crawling, lifting. The kind of drill that broke even the toughest cadets. Tyler smirked as the instructor barked orders. "This will be the day she gives up," he whispered to Jake. Jake nodded. "She won't last halfway." But Lena, standing a few feet behind, said nothing. She had seen the look in Sarah's eyes last night. Quiet fire, not weakness. When the whistle blew, they sprinted off. Mud splashed, lungs burned. Rain started to fall. The track twisted through steep hills and wooden barriers. Sarah ran in silence, her boots steady, her rhythm smooth. Tyler ran just ahead, glancing back with a mocking grin. "Come on, Grandma," he shouted. "Try not to die yet." She said nothing. He slowed slightly, waiting for her to pass. Then, he kicked a patch of mud right at her. She slipped, her knee slamming against a rock. The instructor shouted, "Keep moving." Tyler pretended not to see. Sarah pushed herself up, pain flashing through her leg. But she didn't stop. Not for pain, not for him. By the third mile, the rain poured harder. Some cadets dropped out, gasping and limping. Sarah was bleeding from her knee, her uniform soaked. But she kept running, her mind far away. Every drop of rain sounded like bullets again. Every shout like echoes from the past. Her breath came out sharp, controlled. She wasn't running from Tyler anymore. She was running from ghosts, from the night she lost her team. From the guilt she carried every day since. At the rope climb, she reached the base and grabbed hold. Her hands shook slightly, the blood mixing with rain. Tyler reached the top first and grinned down. "Need help, Grandma?" He mocked. Sarah didn't look up. She just climbed, slow, steady, unbreakable. When she reached the top, Tyler smirked again, but as she descended, the rope suddenly jerked. Someone had loosened the knot. She fell hard, landing on her shoulder. A loud crack echoed. Gasps spread across the field. The instructor rushed forward, but Sarah raised a hand. "I'm fine," she said firmly. Her voice didn't tremble. Though her arm hung stiff at her side, Tyler stood frozen, realizing what had just happened. He hadn't tied it right, and his arrogance had caused it, but she didn't accuse him. She didn't even look at him. By noon, the drill ended. Sarah limped toward the lockers. Dripping with mud and rain, Tyler followed, guilt twisting in his stomach. When she reached the door, he blocked her path. "Why don't you just quit?" he said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Sarah looked at him, really looked, and for the first time she spoke more than a few words. "You think strength means shouting louder," she said softly. "You think leadership means being cruel." Tyler frowned, his pride stinging. "You don't know what leadership is," he snapped. Sarah stepped closer, her eyes calm but burning met his. "I've seen people die following bad leaders," she said, "and I've buried the good ones." Her voice shook slightly, not from fear and from memory. Tyler froze. Something in her tone cut through his anger like a blade. Still, he didn't understand. Not yet that evening during locker cleanup. He made one last mistake. Trying to win back his pride, he cornered her again. "Admit it," he said sharply. "You don't belong here." He shoved her shoulder, forgetting she was still hurt. She stumbled back, catching herself. Her jaw tightened. Something inside her, that calm, patient shell, uncracked. She looked at him, and for a moment, it felt like the whole room stopped breathing. Then in one swift movement, she twisted his wrist, pinned his arm behind his back, and stepped around him. It happened so fast that no one saw it coming. Tyler gasped, trapped. Her voice was low, steady, deadly calm. "Don't ever put your hands on a soldier again," she said. Then she released him and walked away. Everyone stood frozen. No one spoke, no one laughed. They just watched her leave, the sound of her boots echoing down the hall. Later, in the instructor's office, Captain Reynolds said quietly, "She's holding it in too long." The assistant nodded. "They'll find out soon," Reynolds sighed. "Yes, and the truth always surfaces." That night, Sarah sat outside under the stars, her arm in a sling. The pain throbbed, but she barely felt it, she whispered softly. The wind carried her words away. She stared up at the night sky, calm again. She didn't want revenge, she wanted peace, but peace always came after the breaking point, and now the camp was about to learn who she really was. The truth was no longer far. The ghost they mocked was about to become their greatest lesson. The morning sky was heavy with clouds, thick, gray, and waiting to break, just like something else inside Camp Valor. Something no one could name, but they all felt it, like the air before thunder. Sarah stood at the edge of the field, arm still in a sling. She hadn't skipped a single drill, not even with the pain. Her boots were clean, her uniform perfect, her face unreadable. Tyler watched her from across the field. His pride was bruised. His hands still sore from yesterday's takedown. He couldn't stop thinking about it, about how fast she moved, how easily she dropped him to the ground. It haunted him, and he hated it. That morning, the instructor stepped forward with a serious face. "Today's drill," he shouted, "is hand-to-hand combat." Groans, cheers, and nervous laughs filled the air. Each cadet would face another in front of the squad. No weapons, just skill. The goal was to disarm, disable, or control the opponent. No show-offs, no games. Before the matchups were announced, Tyler raised his hand. "I volunteer to spar," he said, "with Sarah." The squad gasped. Even the instructor raised his brow. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I'm sure." Tyler nodded. Smirking, he thought this would be it. The moment he'd win his pride back, maybe even make her quit. Sarah looked at the instructor, who simply nodded. She stepped forward, removing the sling slowly. Her shoulder hurt, but she moved it with control. Tyler chuckled. "Didn't think Grandma could fight with one arm." Sarah didn't reply. She just stood across from him. Still, calm, like a statue in a storm. The cadets circled around them. Rain began to fall, light at first, then harder. It soaked the field quickly, mud forming under their boots. The air was cold, but their bodies were warm with tension. "Begin," the instructor called. Tyler rushed forward, fast, aggressive. He threw a wide swing. Sarah ducked, sidestepped, and spun behind him in one motion. She didn't hit him, she just tapped the back of his knee. He stumbled, slipped in the mud, and cursed. He turned again, angrier now. He lunged, trying to grab her. She dropped low, swept his legs, and he hit the ground hard. The cadets gasped. Tyler jumped back up, growling. This time he charged recklessly. Sarah didn't move until the last second, then locked his arm mid-air, twisted it behind his back, and pressed him face first into the mud. Everyone went silent. Rain pounded on helmets and shoulders. Sarah leaned close to his ear, her voice calm. "You just died," she whispered, and let go. Tyler stayed down, breathing hard, not from pain, but from disbelief. He couldn't understand it. How did she move like that? How did she know exactly what he'd do? How could she see it before it happened? The instructor stepped forward, his face serious. "Enough," he said, then turned to the cadets. "You all need to hear this." He pulled a folder from his bag, opened it, and read aloud. "Lieutenant Sarah Hawthorne, United States Navy, SEAL Team 6, 3 combat deployments, Silver Star for Valor, honorable discharge." A few cadets looked confused. Lena covered her mouth, whispering. "No way," the instructor continued. "She led a hostage rescue in Kandahar, neutralized enemy targets under fire, and saved her team." He paused, looking directly at Tyler. "She's not here to prove herself," he said. "She's here to find peace." Silence. No one moved, no one spoke. The rain fell harder now, but no one cared. Sarah stood still, her shoulders straight. Not proud, not smug, just still. This wasn't her victory. It was just her truth. Finally spoken, finally seen. Tyler looked up at her from the mud, his voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell us?" Sarah looked down, her voice soft. "Because respect that is forced isn't real." And with that she walked away, past the shocked cadets, past the stunned instructor, past the boy who thought he was stronger. She didn't need applause. She didn't want praise. She just wanted to breathe without carrying the weight of her past in silence. But now, the silence was gone, and in its place stood something else. Respect. From that day, no one called her grandma. No one mocked her scars. They watched her with different eyes now, eyes that understood pain and admired the strength that came from surviving it. The rain had stopped, but inside Camp Valor the storm had just begun, not of thunder, but of truth. Tyler sat alone in the locker room, head down, soaked in silence. Mud still clung to his uniform. But that wasn't what made him feel heavy. It was the weight of shame, and the sound of Sarah's words still ringing in his ears. "You just died," she had whispered, and he knew now. She wasn't being dramatic. She wasn't bluffing. She had lived in places where a move like that saved lives, or ended them outside the room. Whispers filled the hallway. "Did you hear what the instructor said?" She was a Navy SEAL, Team 6, the real deal. She got a silver star. A folder lay on the instructor's desk, thin but heavy with truth. Inside it were records that would change how the entire camp saw her. One curious cadet, Max, tiptoed into the office when no one was looking. He flipped it open, his hands trembling a little. Line after line revealed who Sarah truly was. Lieutenant Sarah M. Hawthorne Branch, U.S. Navy, SEAL Team 6 years of service, 11 operations, classified awards, Silver Star, Navy Cross nomination, 2 Purple Heart status. Honorably discharged. Max stepped back, breath caught in his throat. He had called her weak once, had laughed when she slipped. Now all he could see were medals, missions, and pain he would never understand. Word spread like wildfire. By the time evening came, the entire camp knew. Even those who never joined the bullying now walked with lowered eyes, because silence, too, had been part of the damage. Lena sat on her bunk, staring at the scarred dog tag Sarah had left behind on her bed. She held it gently as if touching a piece of someone's soul. This tag had been through places they'd only seen in training videos. She thought back to every time Sarah was alone, every insult she took without flinching, and she felt her chest tighten with guilt. Meanwhile, Tyler stood outside Sarah's room. He had knocked once, then froze. Now he stood, unsure what to say. Finally, Sarah opened the door herself. She didn't look angry. She looked calm. As always, Tyler swallowed hard. "I read the file," he said quietly. Sarah nodded. "I figured. I didn't know," he added. "You weren't supposed to," she replied. "But why?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You could have shut us all up with one sentence." Sarah looked away for a second, then back at him. "If I wanted silence, I would have stayed home," she said. "I came here to remind myself what peace feels like." Tyler lowered his eyes. "We didn't make it easy." "No," she agreed. "But peace isn't about easy." A long silence followed. Then Tyler looked up, his voice shaking. "I'm sorry," he said, "for the jokes, the names, the everything." Sarah looked at him, and for the first time, something soft appeared in her eyes. Not pity, forgiveness. "It takes more strength to admit you're wrong," she said, "and even more to grow from it." He nodded slowly. "I want to learn," he whispered. "Then listen more," she replied. The next morning, things had changed. No announcements were made. No speeches were given. But the way people looked at Sarah had shifted. They stood straighter when she walked by. They offered her space in the front line. They passed her water bottles without being told. But she never acted superior. She didn't demand respect. She earned it the same way she always had, with quiet strength and patience. That afternoon, during leadership class, the instructor paused halfway through his lesson, then turned to Sarah. "Would you mind sharing something with the group?" he asked. Sarah stood slowly. The room went silent, every eye was on her. She looked around at the cadets, all so young, still trying to figure out who they were. Then she spoke. When I joined the Navy, I thought strength meant being louder, tougher, faster. I was wrong. Real strength, she said, is surviving what should have broken you. It's waking up with pain but still showing up. It's watching your friends fall beside you and still finishing the mission. And sometimes, she paused, it's forgiving people who hurt you before they knew better. No one moved. Some cadets blinked fast, holding back tears. Others stared at the ground, thinking of every moment they misjudged her. Tyler raised his hand, voice low but steady. Ma'am, would you train us? Sarah gave a soft smile. I already have. The sun rose slowly over Camp Valor. Its golden light touched every wall, every roof, every tired face, but that morning, the light felt different, softer, quieter, like the beginning of something new. Sarah stood by the flagpole watching the sunrise alone. She had always loved early mornings, not because they were peaceful, but because they meant survival. Another day made it through, another chance to breathe. Behind her, soft footsteps approached. She turned slowly, expecting the usual routine, but what she saw was different. A line of cadets, all of them standing in a row. Tyler was in front, eyes lowered, hands behind his back. They stood silently for a long moment. Then Tyler stepped forward. He didn't smile, didn't joke. He just looked at her and took a deep breath. Ma'am, he said, voice steady but soft. I want to say something. Not as a cadet, not as a teammate, but as a human being. Sarah said nothing. She only nodded, telling him to go on. I was wrong, he said. I mocked you, I judged you. I tried to tear you down. I thought I was strong, but now I see I was just loud. I didn't know who you were, but that's no excuse. You didn't owe us your story, but you gave us your strength anyway. His voice cracked a little, but he kept going. You trained with us, bled with us, and you never gave up. You showed us what real strength looks like. I'm sorry. Truly. The other cadets stepped forward one by one. Max, who once laughed the loudest, now looked her in the eye and said, I thought silence meant weakness, but now I know. It means control. Lena held out the dog tag Sarah had left on her bed. She placed it gently in Sarah's palm. I kept it safe, she whispered. You remind me of who I want to become. Sarah looked down at the tag in her hand. The metal was cold, but her heart felt warm. She had carried it for years, like a piece of memory that refused to fade. Now, someone else saw it not as a badge of pain, but as a symbol of honor. She looked at the group in front of her. These were no longer just noisy kids trying to play soldier. They had changed, not because they were told to, but because they had seen something real, something rare, something earned. I accept your apologies, Sarah said softly, but don't stop here. Learn from this, grow from this. Be better than you were yesterday, Tyler nodded. We will, he said, and if you'll allow it. We want to learn more, wait from you. That afternoon, the instructors gave Sarah the space to lead, not because of rank, but because of respect. She stood at the front of the training ground, her shadow long in the afternoon light. The cadets circled around her, not as bullies, not as skeptics, but as students. She began with simple drills, but added lessons they'd never seen before. Footwork learned from real combat, silence techniques used in nighttime operations, mental focus exercises she'd practiced before stepping into war zones. Every move had meaning, every word had weight. The cadets followed without question, not out of fear but admiration. During break, Tyler sat beside her on a bench. He looked at the field and said, I used to think medals made you great, but now I know it's what you carry inside that counts. Sarah smiled faintly. Medals are medals, she said. They shine in light, but they don't shine in memory. What shines, she added, is how you treat people when no one's looking. Tyler nodded slowly. I hope I can become someone worth remembering. You already are, Sarah replied, because you stopped pretending. That night the cadets surprised her. They had taken one of the wooden training boards and carved something into it. They placed it outside the barracks where everyone could see. It read, Respect is not earned through words. It's earned through silence, service, and scars. in honor of Lieutenant Sarah M. Hawthorne. Sarah stood in front of it for a long time. Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. She simply placed her hand over her heart and whispered, "Thank you." Later, she wrote in her notebook, something she hadn't done in years. "Today, I was seen not as a soldier, not as a ghost, but as a teacher. And maybe that's what healing looks like." The final week at Camp Valor arrived with a quiet weight in the air. The kind of silence that doesn't come from stillness, but from reflection, from change, from growth that nobody expected. Sarah stood outside the barracks at dawn, her hands behind her back. She looked out over the training field where so much had happened, where she had fallen, been mocked, bled, taught, and finally had been understood. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the cool morning breeze brush against her face. This place had challenged her more than combat ever did, not because of danger, but because it tested her will to stay human inside. The cadets were preparing for the final inspection, but their minds weren't on folded shirts or polished boots. They were thinking about her, Sarah, the woman who had entered as a mystery, and now stood as their greatest lesson. Tyler adjusted his collar and looked at himself in the mirror. He barely recognized the face staring back, not because of how he looked, but because of who he had become. He thought back to the first day, to the way he mocked her, shoved her, laughed at her pain. Now those memories felt like knives, but also like anchors, reminders of where he started. He grabbed something from his drawer and tucked it into his pocket. He had something to say, and he didn't want to miss the chance outside. Sarah turned to walk toward the main building when she heard footsteps behind her. She didn't need to turn to know it was him. "I thought you'd be in formation," she said without looking. "I wanted to talk first," Tyler replied, his voice steady but softer than usual. She turned to face him, and for a second, they stood in silence, not tense, not awkward, just real. "I wanted to give you this," Tyler said, pulling a small object from his pocket. It was a patch. Black, simple, with white stitched letters. "Seal, respect seal." He had it made by a friend who stitched combat patches as a hobby. "I know I haven't earned it," he added quickly. "But you did, and more." Sarah took the patch in her hands and stared at it. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she looked at Tyler and smiled. Just a little. "It's not about earning patches," she said. "It's about what they remind you to become." Later that day, the final formation lined up perfectly. The instructors walked through, inspecting uniforms, posture, discipline, but their eyes kept returning to Sarah, because today would be her last day with them. After the inspection, the commanding officer stepped forward. "Before we dismiss you," he said, "we have a small recognition to make." He turned to Sarah and gave her a small wooden plaque carved by the cadets themselves. It read, "To Lieutenant Sarah M. Hawthorne, who taught us that real power walks in silence." Sarah stepped forward slowly, took the plaque in both hands, and nodded. She didn't cry, she didn't speak. She simply looked at each cadet one by one, and they understood. Respect didn't need a speech. When the ceremony ended, the cadets gathered around her near the training field. Lena hugged her first. "You changed everything," she said. Sarah hugged her back gently. "You'll change others too." Max stepped forward next. "I want to join Special Forces one day," he said. Sarah placed her hand on his shoulder. "Then train your mind more than your muscles," she said. "Because strength fades, but clarity saves lives." Finally, Tyler came last. He didn't try to joke, didn't try to lead. He just stood in front of her and saluted. A real salute, no pride, just respect. She saluted back. Two warriors, one who had lived through war, and one just beginning to understand what war really meant. That night, Sarah packed quietly, her boots cleaned one last time, her tag tucked back into her pocket. She didn't need to explain where she was going. She wasn't running, she was simply moving forward, like she always did before she left the base. She looked back once. The barracks stood still. The flag waved gently in the wind, and at the edge of the field, where the cadets once laughed at her, now stood a sign they had built just for her. Legacy of the Silent Warrior. Beneath it, in carved bold letters. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. Sarah smiled, then turned and walked away, not as someone who had something to prove, but as someone who had already proven everything, and somewhere deep in Camp Valor, young cadets would remember her long after she was gone, not because of medals, but because of the day they saw what a true warrior really looked like. A woman who was mocked, broken, tested, but never defeated. Aunt Sarah M. Hawthorne, the ghost they tried to bury, became the compass that changed their direction forever.